The smell of smoke filled Lilah Morrow's lungs as she ran through the burning streets of Hachita, New Mexico territory. The year was 1885, and everything she had ever known was disappearing into flames behind her. Her family's general store, the small home she had grown up in, and the life she had carefully built over her 22 years, all of it consumed by the inferno that had started when lightning struck the saloon during the worst drought in decades. Lilah clutched nothing but the dress on her back and the locket around her neck as she stumbled out beyond the town limits. Her blonde hair, singed at the edges, whipped around her face as she turned to look back at the destruction. Flames reached toward the night sky, painting it orange and red. The distant sound of screams had faded, most townspeople having fled or perished. She had tried to save her parents, but the collapsed roof of their home had made that impossible. Now she stood alone on the dusty road, watching her world burn, tears streaming down her face, leaving clean tracks through the soot on her cheeks. "Ain't nothing left for you there, miss." The voice startled her. Lilah spun around to find a man on horseback, silhouetted against the starlit sky. As he moved closer, the glow of the distant fire revealed his features, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, eyes the color of the New Mexico sky, and a weathered cowboy hat pulled low over his brow. "I have nothing," Lilah whispered, her voice raspy from the smoke. "Everything I own, everyone I love, gone." The cowboy dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. He approached her slowly as one might a spooked horse. When he reached her, he offered a canteen of water. "Name's Nathan Ellis," he said as she drank gratefully. "Most folks call me Nate." After she had quenched her thirst, Lilah handed back the canteen. "Lilah Morrow," she said. I don't know where to go." Nate looked at the burning town, then back at the desolate woman before him. "Seems to me you escaped that burning town with nothing but hope, Miss Morrow." "Hope?" Lilah laughed bitterly. "What good is hope when I have nothing else?" The cowboy's face softened, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "That's all you'll need," he said simply. "That and maybe a ride to the next town." He gestured toward his horse, a sturdy palomino that stood patiently nearby. "I was heading to Silver City. There's work there and people who might help." Lilah hesitated, eyeing the stranger. In normal circumstances, she would never consider accepting such an offer from a man she didn't know. But these weren't normal circumstances. She had no options, no one else to turn to. "Why would you help me?" she asked warily. Nate shrugged. "My ma raised me right. Can't leave a lady stranded in the middle of nowhere with a fire at her back and bandits possibly roaming these parts." He adjusted his hat. "I'll get you to Silver City safe. After that, it's your choice what happens next." Lilah looked once more at the town that had been her home. There was nothing left for her there. Wiping away her tears with a soot-stained hand, she nodded. "I accept your offer, Mr. Ellis." "Just Nate, if you don't mind," he said, offering his hand to help her mount the horse. As Nate swung up behind her, Lilah tensed at the proximity to a stranger, but there was something reassuring about his presence. His arms reached around her to take the reins, creating a protective circle that made her feel safer than she had any right to feel on this terrible night. "Hold tight," he instructed, and with a gentle click of his tongue, the horse began to move away from the burning town. Lilah didn't look back again. There was nothing but ashes behind her now. Whatever lay ahead couldn't possibly be worse than what she'd lost. With nothing but hope and the kindness of a stranger, she rode into the darkness of an uncertain future. The journey to Silver City would take 2 days. As dawn broke across the desert landscape, Nate suggested they stop to rest. He guided the horse off the trail to a small outcropping of rocks that provided some shade from the rising sun. Lilah's body ached from the tension of the night before and from hours in the saddle. As she slid down from the horse, her legs nearly buckled beneath her. Nate caught her elbow, steadying her. "Sorry," she murmured, embarrassed by her weakness. "No need to apologize," he said, releasing her once she was stable. "You've been through hell." While Nate tended to the horse, Lilah took stock of herself. Her dress, once a simple blue calico, was now gray with ash and torn in several places. Her hands were raw, and she could feel blisters forming where she'd tried to push through debris to reach her parents. The memory brought fresh tears to her eyes, which she hastily wiped away. Nate returned with a small bundle from his saddlebag. "It ain't much, but I've got some jerky and hardtack, and water." He offered her a portion, which she accepted gratefully. As they ate in silence, Lilah studied her rescuer. In the daylight, she could see him clearly. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. His clothes were simple, but well-maintained, a sign of someone who respected himself and had pride despite modest means. "Are you from around here?" she asked finally, breaking the silence. Nate shook his head. "Born in Texas, but I've been wandering these territories for about 5 years now. Worked as a ranch hand, did some cattle driving, little bit of prospecting." He took a sip from his canteen. "Nothing seemed to stick. And now I'm heading to Silver City because I heard the Carter Ranch is hiring. They've got one of the biggest spreads in the territory." He looked at her curiously. "What about you? You've been in Hachita your whole life," Lilah nodded. "My parents opened the general store when I was just a child. They came from St. Louis with dreams of building something of their own." She looked down at her hands. "They succeeded too, the store did well. We had a good life." "I'm sorry about your folks," Nate said quietly. "Losing family." "It ain't easy." Something in his tone made Lilah look up. There was genuine understanding in his eyes, not just sympathy. "You've lost family too," she stated rather than asked. Nate nodded. "My parents to fever when I was 18. My older brother in a mining accident 3 years later." He adjusted his hat. "It's why I started moving around. Too many ghosts back home." Their shared grief created an unexpected bond between them. Lilah felt her wariness of this stranger begin to fade. He wasn't just some cowboy who happened upon her. He was someone who understood loss in a way few others could. After resting for an hour, they continued their journey. The desert stretched endlessly around them, beautiful in its harsh way. Nate pointed out landmarks and told her stories about his travels that occasionally coaxed a small smile from her lips despite her grief. By midday, the heat was oppressive. Lilah's head drooped as exhaustion from the night's trauma and lack of sleep caught up with her. She found herself leaning back against Nate's solid chest, her eyes growing heavier with each rhythmic step of the horse. "Go ahead and rest," Nate murmured above her. "I won't let you fall." Too tired to argue, Lilah allowed herself to drift off, lulled by the steady motion and the surprising comfort of a stranger's protection. When she woke, the sun was lower in the sky, and they were approaching a small creek lined with cottonwood trees. "Perfect timing," Nate said as she stirred. "This is Cottonwood Creek. Good place to make camp for the night." They dismounted near the water, and Nate efficiently set about making a small fire and setting up what passed for a camp essentially, his bedroll spread on the ground and the saddle propped as a backrest. "I don't have much in the way of supplies for a lady," he apologized, "but you're welcome to use my bedroll. I'll sleep fine with just my coat." "I couldn't take your bed," Lilah protested. "You've already done so much." Nate waved away her concern. "I've slept on harder ground with less comfort many a night. Please, I insist." While he prepared a simple meal from his provisions, Lilah went to the creek to wash her face and hands. The cool water was a blessing on her skin, and she wished she could bathe properly, but that would have to wait until they reached civilization. She settled for cleaning away as much of the soot and grime as she could. When she returned to the fire, Nate had coffee brewing in a small pot and was heating beans in a tin. He offered her a portion, which she accepted gratefully. As night fell, they sat by the fire, the stars appearing one by one in the vast desert sky. Lilah felt the crushing weight of her loss pressing down on her again without the distraction of travel. "Tell me about them," Nate said softly, as if reading her thoughts. "Your parents." Lilah looked up in surprise, then found herself talking about her father's booming laugh and clever hands that could fix anything, about her mother's famous apple pies, and the way she could calm any angry customer with just a few words. She talked until her voice grew hoarse, and tears flowed freely down her cheeks. Nate listened without interrupting, only occasionally adding more wood to the fire or offering her his handkerchief. When she finally fell silent, he spoke. "They sound like fine people who raised a remarkable daughter." "I don't feel remarkable," Lilah whispered. "I feel lost." "That's natural," Nate assured her. "But you survived for a reason, Miss Morrow. You'll find your way again." "Lilah," she corrected. "Please call me Lilah." "After everything today, Miss Morrow seems too formal." Nate smiled, the firelight catching in his eyes. "Lilah it is." As they settled for the night, Lilah on the bedroll and Nate nearby wrapped in his coat, she found herself grateful for this stranger's kindness. In the span of a day, he had become her only anchor in a world that had been completely upended. "Thank you, Nate," she said softly into the darkness. "Get some rest, Lilah," came his gentle reply. "Tomorrow's another day." For the first time since fleeing the fire, Lilah felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. Dawn came with a chorus of birds and the soft rustling of Nate moving around the camp. Lilah woke to find coffee already brewing and Nate returning from the creek, his hair damp and his face freshly shaved. "Morning," he greeted her. "Hope you slept all right." Lilah sat up, surprised to realize she had indeed slept soundly despite everything. "Better than I expected," she admitted. After a quick breakfast of the last of Nate's provisions, they broke camp. Lilah helped roll up the bedding and secure it to the saddle. "We should reach Silver City by nightfall," Nate told her as he helped her mount the horse. "It's grown quite a bit in recent years. You'll find work there, I'm certain." The thought of arriving in a strange town with nothing to her name sent a wave of anxiety through Lilah, but she tried to hide it. Nate had done more than enough for her already. She couldn't burden him with her fears. As they rode, the landscape gradually changed. The sparse desert gave way to rolling hills with more vegetation. They began to see other travelers on the road, wagons carrying goods, a mail coach that rattled past in a cloud of dust, and occasional lone riders who tipped their hats in greeting. "Does Silver City have a boarding house?" Lilah asked, trying to formulate some kind of plan for her arrival. "Several," Nate confirmed. "Mrs. Whittaker's is the most respectable from what I hear. It's where young ladies new to town often stay." "I have no money," Lilah reminded him, the reality of her situation sinking in again. Nate was quiet for a moment. "I have a bit saved," he said finally. "Enough to get you set up for a week or so until you find work." Lilah twisted in the saddle to look at him. "I couldn't possibly accept more from you." "Consider it a loan," he suggested. "You can pay me back once you're on your feet." She wanted to refuse to maintain some dignity in her reduced circumstances, but practicality won out. "A loan," she agreed reluctantly. "With interest," Nate chuckled. "You drive a hard bargain, Miss Morrow." By late afternoon, they began to see signs of Silver City smoke from chimneys in the distance. more frequent travelers on the road, and eventually the outskirts of the town itself. Silver City was significantly larger than Hachita, with proper streets lined with businesses, a courthouse in the center of town, and houses spread across the surrounding hillsides. As they rode down the main street, Lilah felt overwhelmed by the activity around them. After the quiet days on the trail, the noise and bustle of a thriving town was jarring. People stared at her ash-stained dress and disheveled appearance, making her acutely aware of how she must look. Nate guided the horse to a modest two-story building with a sign that read, "Whitaker Boarding House." He dismounted and helped Lilah down, his hands strong and steady on her waist. "Wait here," he said, tying the horse to a hitching post. "Let me speak to Mrs. Whitaker first." Lilah nodded gratefully, relieved not to have to explain her circumstances to a stranger just yet. As she waited, she tried to smooth her hair and brush some of the dust from her dress, though it was a hopeless task. Nate returned several minutes later with a plump, gray-haired woman in tow. Mrs. Whitaker's kind face creased with concern as she took in Lilah's appearance. "You poor dear," she clucked, taking Lilah's hands in her own. "Mr. Ellis told me about Hachita, such a tragedy. You come right inside now and we'll get you settled." To Lilah's surprise, Mrs. Whitaker didn't ask about payment immediately. Instead, she showed Lilah to a small but clean room on the second floor, promised a hot bath would be drawn immediately, and even offered to find her some clothing. "The Patterson girl left some dresses behind when she got married and moved east," Mrs. Whitaker explained. "She was about your size, I'd wager." Once they were alone in the room, Lilah turned to Nate, who had followed them upstairs carrying his saddlebag. "How much did you pay her?" she asked directly. Nate looked slightly embarrassed. "Enough for 2 weeks' room and board." Nate, he held up a hand to stop her protest. "It's done, and I meant what I said about it being a loan." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small pouch, placing it on the dresser. "There's $20 there. It ain't much, but it'll help until you find work." Lilah stared at the pouch, then at the man who had rescued her from the ashes of her former life. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need," he said simply. "Anyone would have done the same," but they both knew that wasn't true. Many would have ridden past a desperate woman with nothing to offer in return for help. "Will you?" Lilah hesitated, suddenly aware of how much she had come to rely on this stranger in just 2 days. "Will you be staying in Silver City?" Nate nodded. "I'll be heading out to the Carter Ranch tomorrow to see about that job. It's about 5 miles outside of town." The idea of Nate leaving, of being truly alone in this new place, sent a wave of panic through Lilah that surprised her with its intensity. "Perhaps I could." "I mean, would it be possible for me to?" She struggled to find the right words. "I'll come check on you in a few days," Nate promised, seeming to understand her unspoken fear. "Make sure you're settling in all right." Relief washed over her. "I would appreciate that." A knock at the door announced Mrs. Whitaker's return. "Your bath is ready, dear," she said, "and I've found some clothes that should do until we can get you properly outfitted." Nate picked up his hat from where he'd placed it on the bed. "I should be going." "Need to find a place to stay for the night." "Try the Silver Dollar Hotel," Mrs. Whitaker suggested. "It's clean and reasonable." He nodded his thanks, then turned to Lilah. "Get some rest. Things will look better after a bath and a good night's sleep in a real bed." Impulsively, Lilah stepped forward and embraced him. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest, "for everything." Nate seemed surprised by the gesture but returned the hug briefly before stepping back. "You're welcome, Lilah. Remember what I said, hope is all you need." That and a little help now and then. After he left, Mrs. Whitaker led Lilah to a small room at the end of the hall where a copper tub steamed with hot water. For the first time since fleeing Hatchita, Lilah allowed herself to truly believe that she might survive this tragedy after all. The next morning, Lilah woke feeling like a different person. Clean, rested, and dressed in a borrowed blue calico dress that fit reasonably well, she made her way downstairs to the boarding house dining room. Mrs. Whitaker introduced her to the other boarders, two schoolteachers, a young clerk from the bank, and an elderly widow, all of whom expressed sympathy for her circumstances. "Now, dear," Mrs. Whitaker said as they finished breakfast, "we should talk about finding you some employment. Do you have any particular skills?" Lilah thought about the years she'd spent helping in her parents' store. "I can keep accounts, manage inventory, deal with customers. I'm good with numbers." Mrs. Whitaker nodded approvingly. "There are several shops in town that might be looking for help. The Mercantile on Main Street, Barton's Dry Goods, and I believe the Millinery is seeking an assistant as well." By mid-morning, Lilah had visited all three establishments. The Mercantile owner had no positions available, but both Barton's and the Millinery expressed interest. After careful consideration, she accepted the position at Barton's Dry Goods, where the work would be similar to what she'd done at her parents' store. "You can start tomorrow," Mr. Barton said, a kindly man with spectacles perched on his nose. 8 o'clock sharp. The wage is $15 a month, with Sundays off. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to pay for her room and board and eventually repay Nate. The thought of him made Lilah wonder how his meeting at the Carter Ranch was going. She found herself hoping he would secure the position and remain nearby. That evening, as she sat in the boarding house parlor with the other residents, Mrs. Whitaker approached her with a small package. "This came for you," she said, handing Lilah the brown paper parcel. Confused, Lilah opened it to find a simple but lovely green ribbon and a note written in a strong, masculine hand. "Thought you might like something new to start your new life." Nate, the thoughtfulness of the gesture brought tears to Lilah's eyes. It wasn't an expensive gift, but it represented something precious, the possibility of beginning again. The next morning, Lilah wore the ribbon in her hair as she reported for her first day at Barton's Dry Goods. The work was familiar enough that she quickly fell into a rhythm, impressing Mr. Barton with her efficiency and knowledge. "You're a godsend, Miss Morrow," he told her by the end of the day. "My wife used to handle the accounts and organization before her arthritis got too bad. Things have been in a state since." Lilah found satisfaction in the work and in knowing she was making herself useful. Each evening, she returned to the boarding house, ate dinner with the other residents, and then retired to her room where she would sit by the window, wondering if Nate had secured the job at the Carter Ranch and when she might see him again. 4 days after their arrival in Silver City, she got her answer. Lilah was arranging a display of fabric when the bell above the door jingled, and Nate walked into the store. He wore clean clothes, his hat in his hands, and a smile that made her heart beat faster. "Miss Morrow," he greeted her formally, aware of their public setting, "I see you've found employment." "Mr. Ellis," she replied, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. "Yes, Mr. Barton has been kind enough to hire me." "And she's been a tremendous asset already," Mr. Barton called from behind the counter. "You know each other?" Nate nodded. "We traveled to Silver City together. Miss Morrow lost everything in the Hatchita fire." Mr. Barton's expression softened. "Yes, terrible business that. We've had several refugees come through town. The territorial government is sending aid, but it'll be too little, too late for most." Lilah turned back to Nate. "Did you secure the position at the Carter Ranch?" His smile widened. "I did. Started 2 days ago. Mr. Carter put me in charge of breaking the new horses they bought from a ranch in Texas." "That sounds dangerous," Lilah said, Unable to hide her concern, Nate chuckled. "I've been breaking horses since I was 16. It's what I'm best at." Mr. Barton looked between the two of them with interest, then tactfully moved to help another customer who had entered the store. "I see you're wearing the ribbon," Nate noted, his eyes lingering on her hair. Lilah touched it self-consciously. "It was very thoughtful of you, thank you." "It suits you." He cleared his throat. "I was wondering if you might allow me to escort you to dinner this evening, to celebrate your new position." The invitation caught Lilah by surprise. She had been hoping to see Nate again, but hadn't expected him to seek her out for a social engagement. "I would like that very much," she said, a warm feeling spreading through her chest. "I'll call for you at the boarding house at 6, if that's agreeable." Lilah nodded, and Nate replaced his hat, tipping it slightly before departing with a promise to see her that evening. As she watched him leave, Lilah realized that for the first time since the fire, she was looking forward to something with genuine anticipation rather than dread. At precisely 6 o'clock, Nate arrived at the boarding house. Mrs. Whitaker showed him to the parlor where Lilah waited, wearing the blue calico dress with the green ribbon holding back her hair, which she had carefully arranged in soft waves. "You look lovely," Nate said sincerely as he offered his arm. "Thank you," Lilah replied, taking it. She had used some of the money he'd given her to purchase a light shawl, which she now draped over her shoulders against the evening chill. They walked to a small restaurant called the Pioneer, which Nate assured her served the best food in Silver City. As they entered, several patrons greeted Nate by name. "You've made acquaintances quickly," Lilah observed as they were seated at a table near the window. "The Carter Ranch has been in the area for years," Nate explained. "Working there opens doors in Silver City." He looked slightly embarrassed. "To be honest, I mentioned to a few people that I would be dining with you this evening, and they were kind enough to recommend the Pioneer." The idea that Nate had been talking about her to others sent a pleasant flutter through Lilah's stomach. "And what did you tell them about me?" "Only that you survived a terrible tragedy with remarkable courage, and that I was fortunate enough to make your acquaintance on the road from Hatchita." Their conversation flowed easily through dinner, moving from Lilah's experiences at Barton's Dry Goods to Nate's first days at the Carter Ranch. He described the property with its sprawling pastures and the spirited horses he was working with. "Mr. Carter has a daughter about your age," Nate mentioned as they shared an apple pie for dessert. "Caroline. She's organizing a social for next Saturday and specifically asked me to extend an invitation to you when I mentioned your name." "She invited me, but she doesn't even know me," Lilah said, surprised. "Apparently, news of your arrival and circumstances has made the rounds." "Silver City isn't that large and newcomers are always of interest." Nate hesitated. "I hope you don't mind that people know about Hatchita." Lilah considered this. While she didn't want to be defined by tragedy, the fact was that the fire had shaped her current reality. "I don't mind. It's part of who I am now." She looked up at him. "Will you be attending this social as well?" "I will," Nate confirmed. "In fact, I was hoping you might allow me to escort you there." 2 weeks ago, Lilah's life had been predictable and secure. Now, everything was uncertain except for the man sitting across from her, a man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect since the moment they met. "I would be honored," she said softly. After dinner, they walked slowly back to the boarding house, the stars bright above them in the clear night sky. When they reached the front porch, Lilah turned to face Nate. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," she said. It's the first time I've felt almost normal since the fire." Nate took her hand gently in his. "You're an extraordinary woman, Lilah Morrow. Most people would be shattered by what you've endured, but here you are, building a new life from the ashes of the old one." The tenderness in his voice and the warmth of his hand on hers made Lilah bold. "I couldn't have done it without you, Nate," he smiled, his eyes reflecting the soft glow of the boarding house lamps. "Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Good night, Lilah." "Good night, Nate," she whispered, her skin tingling where his lips had touched. As she watched him walk away, Lilah realized that what had started as gratitude toward her rescuer was becoming something deeper, something that both thrilled and frightened her with its intensity. The days leading up to the Carter social were filled with work and preparation. Lilah had earned her first week's wages, and with Mrs. Whitaker's help, she found a seamstress who could quickly alter a second-hand dress for the occasion, a lovely lavender creation with delicate lace trim that had once belonged to a banker's wife who had moved to San Francisco. "You'll be the belle of the ball, Mrs. Whitaker declared when Lilah tried on the finished dress the evening before the social. Lilah blushed at the attention but couldn't deny the pleasure she felt at the transformation. For the first time since the fire, she didn't look like a refugee or charity case. The woman in the mirror looked confident and hopeful. Saturday arrived clear and warm. Nate appeared at the boarding house promptly at 2 o'clock, driving a smart buggy borrowed from the Carter ranch. He wore his best clothes, a clean black suit, white shirt, and string tie, and had trimmed his hair and beard. "You look." He began when Lilah descended the stairs in her lavender dress, the green ribbon woven into an elaborate hairstyle Mrs. Whitaker had helped her create. He seemed momentarily at a loss for words. "Beautiful doesn't seem adequate." Lilah felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." The Carter Ranch was impressive, a large main house built of sturdy timber with a wide veranda wrapped around it, surrounded by well-maintained outbuildings and corrals. As they approached, Lilah could see dozens of people already gathered on the grounds, with tables set up under large shade trees and a cleared area where several musicians were tuning their instruments. Nate helped Lilah down from the buggy and offered his arm. "Nervous?" he asked, noticing her hesitation. "A little," she admitted. "I haven't attended a social since before." "You'll be fine," he assured her, covering her hand on his arm with his own. "These are good people." As they walked toward the gathering, a young woman with auburn hair piled high on her head spotted them and hurried over. "You must be Miss Morrow," she exclaimed. "I'm Caroline Carter. I'm so pleased you could join us today." Lilah was taken aback by the warm welcome. "Thank you for inviting me, Miss Carter. It's a pleasure to meet you. Please call me Caroline. Any friend of Nate's is a friend of mine." She linked her arm through Lilah's free one. "Come, I must introduce you to everyone. Nate, you won't mind if I steal her away for a bit, will you?" Nate chuckled. "Not at all, as long as you promise to return her in time for the dancing." For the next hour, Lilah found herself introduced to what felt like half the county. Everyone was kind, if curious, and many expressed sympathy for her losses in Hatchita. To her surprise, no one treated her with pity, only respectful concern and genuine welcome. "Your Nate has made quite an impression on my father," Caroline confided as they enjoyed refreshments under a large oak tree. "Pa says he's the best horse trainer he's seen in years." "He's not my Nate," Lilah corrected gently. Though the idea sent a pleasant flutter through her chest, Caroline raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps not yet, but I've seen the way he looks at you, and the way you look at him, if you don't mind my saying so." Before Lilah could respond, the musicians began playing in earnest, and Nate appeared at her side. "I believe I was promised a dance," he said, extending his hand. Lilah placed her hand in his. "I don't recall making any promises, Mr. Ellis, but I would be delighted nonetheless." As Nate led her to the dance area, Lilah caught Caroline watching them with a knowing smile. Perhaps the young woman saw something that Lilah herself was only beginning to acknowledge, that her feelings for Nate had grown far beyond gratitude. Nate proved to be a surprisingly graceful dancer, guiding Lilah confidently through a waltz. "Where did a cowboy learn to dance so well?" she asked. "My mother insisted all her sons learn," he explained. "Said no child of hers would embarrass himself in polite company." "She taught you well," Lilah said, enjoying the security of his arm around her waist and the easy way they moved together. They danced several more times, with occasional breaks for refreshments and conversation with other guests. As the afternoon wore on, Lilah found herself relaxing completely for the first time since the fire. The weight of her losses didn't disappear, but it became bearable in the warmth of new friendships and Nate's steady presence beside her. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ranch grounds, Nate suggested they take a walk before the evening chill set in. He led her away from the main gathering toward a small rise overlooking the property. "I wanted to show you this," he said as they reached the top. "Best view in the county." The vista was indeed spectacular, rolling hills stretching toward distant mountains, painted in shades of gold and purple by the setting sun. "It's beautiful," Lilah breathed. "I come up here sometimes after work," Nate admitted. "Reminds me why I love this life, even with all its hardships." Lilah looked at him curiously. "Do you think you'll stay at the Carter Ranch, I mean?" Nate was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the horizon. "I've been moving from place to place for 5 years, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. But lately, I've been thinking it might be nice to stop wandering." "What's changed?" Lilah asked softly, though something in her heart already knew the answer. Nate turned to face her, his expression serious. "I think you know, Lilah." The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Nate, I know it's fast," he said quickly. "We've known each other barely 2 weeks, but when I found you on that road outside Hatchita, something changed for me. I can't explain it, but it felt like I'd been looking for you without knowing it." Lilah's heart pounded in her chest. "I lost everything that night," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Everything except hope. And then you came along and told me that was all I needed." "I meant it," Nate said, taking a step closer. "But I'm starting to think I need something too." He reached out slowly, giving her time to step away if she wished, and took her hand in his. "I need you, Lilah Morrow. I know it's soon, and I know you're still healing, but I'd like permission to court you properly. To see if what I'm feeling, what I hope you're feeling too, might grow into something lasting." Lilah looked into his eyes and saw sincerity, respect, and something deeper that made her heart soar despite all the logical reasons to be cautious. "Yes," she said simply. "I would like that very much." The smile that broke across Nate's face was like the sunrise, warm and full of promise. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned down until his lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Lilah had been kissed before, awkward, fumbling encounters with a boy from her hometown, but nothing had prepared her for the tenderness of Nate's kiss, or the way it seemed to ignite something deep within her. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, the world around them seemed to have changed subtly, as if they were seeing it through new eyes. "We should get back," Nate said reluctantly. "People will be wondering where we've gone." As they walked hand in hand back toward the social, Lilah realized that for the first time since the fire, she was looking forward to the future rather than dwelling on the past. With Nate beside her, hope didn't seem like such a fragile thing after all. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Lilah's life, despite the shadow of her losses that sometimes still fell across her heart. Nate courted her with an old-fashioned respect that touched her deeply, bringing flowers when he came to take her to dinner, writing her notes when his work kept him at the ranch for days at a time, always treating her with a consideration that spoke of his genuine feelings. By mid-July, 2 months after the Hatchita fire, Lilah had established herself firmly in Silver City. Her work at Barton's Dry Goods had expanded to include managing much of the business's day-to-day operations, as Mr. Barton increasingly trusted her judgment and abilities. She had repaid Nate's loan in full, though he had protested that it wasn't necessary, and had moved from the boarding house to a small rented room above the millinery that offered more privacy and independence. On a warm Saturday evening, Nate took Lilah for a ride in the hills outside town. They stopped at a pretty spot beside a stream where he had arranged a picnic dinner. "This is lovely," Lilah said as she helped him spread a blanket on the ground. "How did you manage to prepare all this with your duties at the ranch?" Caroline helped, Nate admitted with a grin. "She's quite invested in our relationship, in case you hadn't noticed," Lilah laughed. "She's asked me at least 3 times when we're going to make it official, whatever that means." Nate's expression grew serious. "Actually, that's something I wanted to talk to you about." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, and Lilah's heart began to race. It seemed both too soon and somehow exactly right when Nate knelt before her. "Lilah Morrow, I know we've only known each other a short time, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, your strength, your kindness, your determination. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small pearl. "It's not fancy," he said apologetically, "but I wanted you to have something that was yours alone, not borrowed or secondhand, something to start our new life together." Tears filled Lilah's eyes. "It's perfect," she whispered. "And yes, Nate Ellis, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into an embrace, Lilah marveled at the twists of fate that had brought them together. From the ashes of tragedy had risen something beautiful, and unexpected, a love that promised to heal the wounds of the past and build a future neither of them had imagined possible. They agreed to a short engagement, with the wedding planned for early September. Caroline Carter immediately volunteered to help with arrangements, and Mrs. Whitaker insisted on hosting the reception at the boarding house. "It's where your story in Silver City began," she told Lilah. "It seems fitting that your next chapter should start there too." As the wedding day approached, Lilah found herself thinking often of her parents. The joy of her upcoming marriage was tinged with sadness that they wouldn't be there to see it. One evening, as she and Nate walked along Silver City's Main Street after dinner, she shared these feelings with him. "I wish they could have known you," she said softly. "They would have loved you." Nate squeezed her hand. "I wish I could have known them too. But Lilah, I believe they're watching over you, over us." His words brought comfort, as did his understanding of her grief. Nate never tried to rush her healing or pretend that the loss wasn't still painful. Instead, he stood beside her, offering strength when she needed it and space when that was what she required. 2 days before the wedding, a package arrived for Lilah at Barton's Dry Goods. Inside was a beautiful white dress with a note from Caroline. "Every bride deserves something new and beautiful. With love from your friend." The gesture moved Lilah deeply. She had planned to wear the lavender dress from the social, having no funds for a proper wedding gown. Caroline's gift was more than just a dress. It was an affirmation that Lilah had found not only love but also community in her new home. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Lilah prepared in Mrs. Whitaker's private rooms, with Caroline and several other women from town helping her dress and arrange her hair. The green ribbon Nate had given her her first possession in her new life was woven into her bridal wreath. Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, Mrs. Whitaker recited as she adjusted Lilah's veil. The dress is new, the ribbon is old, my lace handkerchief is borrowed, and she fastened a small sapphire pin to the inside of Lilah's bodice. This blue pin belonged to my mother. It's brought luck to 3 generations of brides in my family. When it was time for the ceremony, Mr. Barton appeared at the door. "Miss Morrow," he said formally, "I would be honored to escort you if you'll permit me." Lilah blinked back tears. "I would be grateful, Mr. Barton, thank you." The small church was filled with people, not just their close friends, but many townspeople who had come to witness the union of the survivor from Hatchita and the cowboy who had found her. As Mr. Barton led her down the aisle, Lilah saw only Nate, standing tall and proud at the altar, his eyes never leaving her face. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They exchanged traditional vows, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life might bring. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, and Nate kissed her with a tenderness that belied the passion in his eyes, Lilah felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she belonged, not in the ashes of the past, but in the promise of the future they would build together. The reception at the boarding house was a joyful affair, with food and music and well wishes from everyone present. Mr. Carter presented them with a surprising wedding gift, the deed to a small parcel of land adjacent to the main ranch property. "For your home," he explained. "Nate's too valuable to lose, and I suspect you'll want to put down roots now." Lilah was overwhelmed by the generosity. "We can't possibly accept—" "You can and you will," Mr. Carter interrupted with a smile. "Consider it an investment in my ranch's future. Nate knows horses better than anyone I've ever employed, and you, Mrs. Ellis, have proven yourself quite capable in business matters. Perhaps someday you'll help manage the ranch accounts." The idea of working alongside Nate, of building not just a home but a shared purpose, filled Lilah with excitement. That night, as they lay together in the small hotel room they'd rented for their wedding night, she shared these thoughts with her new husband. "I never imagined this," she admitted as she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "When I ran from Hatchita, I thought my life was over. Now it feels like it's just beginning." Nate's arms tightened around her. "I told you hope was all you needed," he murmured into her hair. Lilah raised herself up to look into his eyes. "You were right about that. But I needed you too, Nate Ellis, more than I ever could have guessed." His answer was a kiss that spoke of all the tomorrows stretching before them, full of promise and possibility. The first year of their marriage passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. Using lumber provided by Mr. Carter, and with help from the other ranch hands, Nate built a modest but comfortable home on their land. Lilah continued working at Barton's Dry Goods while also helping with the ranch accounts, as Mr. Carter had suggested. In the evenings, she and Nate would sit on their front porch, watching the sunset and talking about their dreams for the future. In the spring of 1887, almost 2 years after the Hatchita fire, Lilah discovered she was expecting their first child. Nate's reaction to the news was everything she could have hoped for: joy, tenderness, and a fierce protectiveness that made her feel cherished beyond measure. "A baby," he said in wonder, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." As Lilah's pregnancy progressed, she reduced her hours at the store and focused more on preparing for the child's arrival. The women of Silver City rallied around her, sharing advice and helping to sew baby clothes and blankets. Caroline, who had married a young lawyer from Santa Fe the previous winter, wrote regularly with suggestions and encouragement. On a cold December morning, after a long and difficult labor, Lilah gave birth to a son. They named him Thomas, after Nate's father, with William as a middle name to honor Lilah's father. The tiny boy with a shock of dark hair and eyes the same blue as Nate's became the center of their world. "He's perfect," Nate whispered the first time he held his son. "Absolutely perfect." As Thomas grew, so did the Ellis family's prosperity. Nate's reputation as a horse trainer spread throughout the territory, bringing business to the Carter Ranch and allowing them to expand their operations. Lilah, with her head for business, helped establish a breeding program that produced horses sought after by buyers from as far away as Denver and San Francisco. By the time Thomas was 3, they had added a new wing to their house and were able to hire a young woman from town to help with household chores. Lilah still kept the books for the ranch, but now did so from a small office in their home, with Thomas playing at her feet while she worked. In the summer of 1891, their family grew again with the arrival of a daughter they named Grace, a delicate little girl with Lilah's blonde hair and sweet temperament. Watching Nate with their children patient, loving, and completely devoted, Lilah often marveled at how complete her life had become. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Nate surprised Lilah with a special gift, a locket to replace the one she had lost in the fire. "Open it," he urged as she admired the delicate gold piece. Inside was a tiny painting of their family, Nate, Lilah, Thomas, and baby Grace, expertly rendered by an artist Nate had commissioned from Santa Fe. "So you'll always have us close to your heart," he explained. Tears filled Lilah's eyes as she fastened the locket around her neck. "I don't need this to keep you close," she said, "but I'll treasure it always." That night, after the children were asleep, they sat on their porch swing as they had so many evenings before. The ranch spread out before them, peaceful in the moonlight, and beyond it the lights of Silver City twinkled in the distance. "You ever think about Hatchita?" Nate asked quietly. "About what might have been if the fire hadn't happened?" Lilah considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I still miss my parents. I still wish they could have known our children." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "But I've come to believe that life gives us exactly what we need, even when it doesn't seem that way at the time." "And what did you need?" Nate asked, his arm tightening around her. "You," she said simply. "Our children. This life we've built together." She looked up at the stars scattered across the New Mexico sky. "The fire took everything I had, but it led me to everything I needed." Nate turned to face her, taking her hands in his. After 6 years of marriage, he still looked at her with the same wonder he had shown on their wedding day. "Do you remember what I said to you that first night, when you told me you had nothing but hope?" Lilah smiled. "You said that was all I'd need." "I believed it then," Nate said softly, "but I had no idea how much more we'd find together." As they sat wrapped in each other's arms, watching the night deepen around them, Lilah thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the ashes of tragedy had risen a life more beautiful than she could have imagined, not because fate had been kind, but because they had faced its cruelties together and refused to let hope die. In the years that followed, the Ellis family continued to thrive. Thomas grew into a strong, thoughtful young man with his father's way with horses and his mother's head for business. Grace became a lively, intelligent girl whose artistic talents surprised and delighted everyone. And in 1895, they welcomed another son, James, who combined the best qualities of both his parents with a spirit entirely his own. The Carter Ranch expanded under Mr. Carter's and Nate's leadership, eventually becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. When Mr. Carter passed away in 1898, he left the management of the ranch to Nate, with ownership shared between Caroline and her brothers. Lilah never forgot the night she had fled Hatchita with nothing but the clothes on her back and the locket that had been lost in her desperate escape. But that memory no longer brought pain, only gratitude for the path it had set her on and the love it had led her to find. On a warm evening in the summer of 1905, 20 years after the fire, Lilah stood on the porch of their home, watching her family gather for a celebration. Thomas, now 18 and about to leave for college in Denver, was showing his younger siblings a trick with one of the new Colts. Nate, his hair now streaked with silver but his eyes as bright as ever, was setting up tables in the yard for the guests who would soon arrive to mark the anniversary of their arrival in Silver City. As Lilah watched the scene before her, she touched the locket at her throat and said a silent prayer of thanks for the life she had found, not despite tragedy, but through it. She had escaped a burning town with nothing but hope, and just as Nate had promised all those years ago, it had indeed been all she needed.